It's time for the Movie Rate Movie Review, and tonight I'm going to talk about the 1982 Tron film. It is a science fiction film, it is an adventurous film, and it involves a hacker trying to break in a top security program, which he himself has written, or at least a majority of it, and the program itself fights back in a way, and is very much aware of his hacking skills, and actually sucks him into the program. And so, he is actually in part of these games that we see, which if you've seen this film, you know what I'm talking about. So he's actually forced to play these war games within the system itself. And what I want to point out on the highlights of this film is the neon graphics glow effect on the costumes of the characters and the atmosphere itself. Every scene, I love the fact that it makes you feel like you were actually in the program. I absolutely love it. I love how they made it very different, very kind of eclectic in a way, but it's very much like you are actually inside the actual motherboard itself, the actual computer, which is great. I think this is the best thing I've ever seen from a 1982 film, or at least in a long time, because it's unique. It separates from all these other films when a science fiction film like this. And it's definitely different. So that's definitely to take note. And I also want to point out that the acting, as far as different actors, that not exactly, at least for many people who either first see this movie or maybe have seen it a couple times, doesn't exactly recognize everybody in this film. Now, there's a couple, one or two, maybe three familiar faces that you might know. But for the most part, at least for this time era, they weren't exactly like A-listers per se, in terms of what we've been used to, the Hollywood A-listers and so forth. And I think it fits very well. A little cheesy, but I really don't have a problem with that. I have no problem with the acting and so forth. But I also want to point out that some scenes, when it comes to the story itself, some of the scenes, in my opinion, just feels a little bit too stretched. Like, kind of takes a little bit too long. Like, I love the scenes where, the character is forced to play the games with his own life because he himself is human, which you can tell in a way he almost forgets who he is when he's in the system in a way. But the other characters he meets who are human that actually were a part of writing this program or a part of the company itself who wrote the programs for this system are part of these games too, but they don't have the same kind of memories he does. They only have like bits and pieces. Like one of them says, my creator and so forth, something like that, if you recognize that. And I think that, in my opinion, the scenes with these characters, it kind of drags on to like the running, and it doesn't really fixate too much on the game aspect. Now, I'm not saying the whole thing should be about the games. It's not. They got to move on with the story. I have to, shut down the system or take over the system or whatever needs to be done in order to take out the quote master of the system. And I feel that this could have been a little bit more, more in depth with these characters, because you got multiple characters alongside with the main character like that he meets, and it just seems like they do more evading than fighting. Now, I'm not saying that they should be like these expert soldiers or anything like that. I'm simply saying like some survival. At least two of these guys who have already been in the system, God knows how many cycles. At least they could do, just fend off, a few guards here and there. But that's the thing. We only see a fraction of these guards from the system itself that the master sends out and whatnot, and it's very minuscule. And it's like when they hijack that big, like, tank-looking thing, which I'm just going to say it's a tank, and please correct me in the comments if you know the proper name of it. The one where he basically has a hard time driving, and he just finds it stranded, so they both, him and an injured character, grabs it and so forth. And I just felt that, there should have been a little bit more action involved with this, because they are in the system. You think that there'd be a lot more guys, trying to go after these characters who go off grid and try to, escape. I mean, come on, man. This guy's a master programmer in the system itself who controls all this stuff and sends, all these people basically to their death most of the time, unless obviously they're human and they, know how to do this. But yet, we see a lot of running, a lot of evading, a lot of, just these main characters in empty spaces, empty rooms, and so forth. And, not a whole lot is really going on, except, some drama here, a little bit of love interest, from the female. And it's just, to me, that's where it kind of divides it up between, you got, at the beginning, had a strong finish, or, it did have a strong finish, but it had a strong beginning too, in my opinion. You had the strong beginning where they're doing the games, which is pretty cool and impactful, and that that's where you want to focus on. And then once they hit the off grid, man, you kind of want to expect the same thing, but a little bit more elevated. And I felt like that kind of didn't do that though. It's just running through empty space, and here we go. Here's the finish line, And I also felt that the story was so fixated on these characters getting to the main point of the story by the end. They don't focus on what's happening outside the program, outside the system, what's going on in reality, what's going on in the real world. Why isn't, or who isn't or is trying to stop the main guy, who allowed all this programming to happen. We don't see any of that. We don't see the characters that were trying to help the main character, break into the system and so forth. We see at the beginning, but all that just disappears once the main character enters the system. It's really just what's going on in the system. We don't see what's the progress of outside the system, what's happening, and it never really goes in between the scenes, reality, and then what's going on in the system, reality, and so forth. We just see mainly what's going on in the system. And, I don't have a major problem with that, but I like to see, as these characters that are, trying to help out the main character outside the system and trying to find him. I mean, we don't see them trying to get him back out of the system, per se, while they're in the system. We don't see these characters try to break into the system and try to delay whatever's going on, that is preventing the main character from progressing and so forth. We don't see any of this. We just see mainly what's going on in the system with these characters. Run, evade, this, that. And I just felt that there should have been more action involved between in the system and the reality of what's going on outside the system. Why can't we see, one of the hackers, try to pull some tricks and put up firewalls or something like that and try to stop the characters that's inside the system to get the other characters to keep going and stuff like that. Why can't we just see that, see what's going on outside? Let's see what's going on inside of the system, And I felt it was just too much involved, super involved within that. And now I would have been satisfied a little bit inside and outside of the system, but for the most part, it's all inside the system. It's not really fixating, dividing on the focus between the two. And in my opinion, I don't think that would actually devoid away the audience of the two. I think that, it gives us an insight. Okay, these guys are trying their best to either get the main character back in reality out of the system, or they're trying to stop the master, what's going on inside the system, doing what they can with their hacking skills and whatnot. I mean, we see what kind of stuff they're into at the beginning of the film, and it kind of doesn't fixate on that. It kind of doesn't utilize that kind of technology. We see that the guy gets sucked into the system, obviously, from that kind of technology, but that's where it stops right there, and then we don't see these other characters ever again, pretty much the entire duration of the film. But I do feel that this film it's a good film. It's a good science fiction film. I just felt that it should have had a more divided action-based scenarios between other characters, meaning that, you see one or two characters, run off as we see in the film, but they kind of just disappear. Obviously, one gets injured, but the other one continue onward, and we see later on in the film, but we don't see kind of like their own scenario, what's going on with them. How are they going to fend off, these guards and so forth, trying to get to the main point in the film, and it just fixate mainly on the main character and what's going on with him. So I just felt that there should have been more action, and it became almost a soap opera for a minute there throughout some of the film, but not enough to the point where like I was bored or lost interest or anything like that. But again, the best points of this film is the overlook design, the overlook of the atmosphere of what it looks like inside of a program system, and I thought that was unique. I thought that was like one of the best highlights, and I loved how they utilized with the war games that they implemented, and it was so unique, and I would have liked to have seen more of that periodically, scattered throughout the film. That would have been cool, but I would give this film, out of a 10, I will give it at least a 6.7, 6.8 at least, because it does have great design. It does have science fiction feel to it, and like as other people will say, you will nerd out a little bit on the technology, but as a nerd, you would want more out of this film. Even if it is a 1982 film, you would like, oh man, they could have done this, could have done that. But I understand that other films would have certain budgets, certain this, certain that. But I'm not expecting like a multi-billion dollar, multi-million dollar, whatever type of budget. I would just wanted to see more action with what they did with the war games and so forth, and the main boss master in the program and so forth, rather than just seeing a whole bunch of running, a whole bunch of evading and subtlety and so forth. But it's a good film. It's definitely worth watching, and I definitely recommend it because it's an interesting look of how one person would react when they get sucked into a program. What are you going to do? You get sucked into these games, and even though you are experienced in playing these games, and you have no idea how to like avoid or get out of the system, you just kind of go with it in a way, and you just eventually figure it out at some point as you get off grid and so forth. But it's a good movie. I definitely recommend it.